Nobody saw it coming. Not Rasheeda, not the cast, and definitely not VH1. The drama that had barely settled between Rasheeda, Kirk, and Jasmine was supposed to be the end of it. The final blowout. The last chapter in a book already rewritten too many times. But what was coming wasn't loud. It didn't start with a fight or a confessional. It began with a whisper. A single photo. One still image passed from hand to hand like contraband. It was Jasmine who held it. But she didn't wave it around. She didn't scream. She didn't even raise her voice. She just reached into her purse like she was pulling out a receipt and slid it across the table to Rasheeda like it was a formality. But it wasn't. It was betrayal disguised as paper. A toddler's face stared up from the glossy surface. Brown skin, soft curls, a shy smile, and a gap in his teeth that turned the room into ice. That gap, that unmistakable Kirk Frost gap. The silence that followed was suffocating. No yelling. No reaction. Just the sound of Rasheeda trying to breathe through the shards of her own heartbreak. Her fingers trembled as she held the image. Eyes locked on the face of a child she'd never seen. A child that Jasmine was now saying didn't belong to her, not biologically. "That's Zayden," she said, barely above a whisper. "He's not mine, he's Kirk's second child. From someone else." And just like that, the reality cracked. The air in the room turned thick, the kind of thick you can't cut through, not with truth, not with denial. Rasheeda didn't scream. She didn't slap the table or demand proof. She just stared like her soul had been kicked out of her body, and that's when Jasmine made it worse, or maybe better. She pulled out her phone and hit play on a voice memo. A woman's voice filled the air, timid, nervous, but clear. "Hi Jasmine, I've been meaning to say this for a while. I didn't know about you or Rasheeda when it happened, but I think you deserve to know. I did a private DNA test. He's Kirk's 99.9%. It was someone else. A new voice. A new name. Maya. And she wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't part of the show, but now she was part of the truth." Rasheeda stood up slowly, like the ground itself betrayed her. "No. You're not doing this to me again," she said, but her voice was barely holding it together. "Not again." Jasmine stood too, trembling but firm. "I'm not dragging you. I'm exposing him. Because he's been lying to all of us." And that's when the door slammed open like it was waiting for the perfect moment. Miss Charlene, Rasheeda's mother, stormed in, scarf tight, eyes wide, voice sharper than Judgment Day. Another baby. Another woman. And this fool didn't even have the guts to tell my daughter. That was the final straw. Rasheeda cracked. "Mama, I can't do this again. I knew something was off. I just didn't want it to be real." And the cameras didn't stop rolling. Production didn't step in. Nobody yelled cut. Because this wasn't reality TV anymore. This was reality bleeding out. And it bled, fast. One of the producers had already leaked a still frame of the photo to a gossip blog. Within hours, the internet had its teeth in it. Kirk Frost has another secret child. Rasheeda blindsided again. Miss Charlene pops off. The headlines wrote themselves. And the comments were even louder. "Lock this man up. Why does Jasmine always pretend she's doing this for sisterhood? Rasheeda is too calm." I'd have flipped that whole set. But the receipts kept coming. Screenshots of $750 wire transfers, not to a person, but to an LLC. And that LLC traced right back to Maya's apartment complex. A photo of Kirk at a Shell gas station, hood up, holding a baby with the same gap-toothed smile. Sunglasses low, but the face unmistakable. Kirk had been caught again. Rasheeda sat in her dressing room like she was frozen in time. Her brand team huddled in the background, whispering crisis strategies, but she didn't hear them. "How many times?" she muttered. "How many damn times is he gonna play me?" But no one answered, because this wasn't a brand issue. This wasn't even a show issue. This was pain. Old, ugly, layered pain. The kind you don't heal from with a wig change and a photo shoot. The set shut down for 2 days. Jasmine vanished. Kirk ghosted everyone. And Rasheeda stopped responding altogether. The reunion was in chaos. And just when the internet thought it was over, a notification appeared. At my_thamuse is live with Jasmine. The moment it went up, thousands tapped in. And then tens of thousands. Maya sat on a couch. No glam, toys behind her. Raw and real. "I didn't want this," she said. "I never wanted to be a part of the show. I just wanted to raise my son in peace. But when I saw Kirk on TV acting like he was some changed man, like he was this loyal husband, I snapped. Jasmine sat beside her, quiet, watching, as Maya dropped the final bomb. She lifted the paternity test, official, stamped, 99.9%, and then, she played the audio. Kirk's voice, unmistakable. Don't let Rasheeda find out. We'll take care of the boy. Just keep it low. That voice shattered something in Rasheeda that no one could repair. She watched the live in silence from her bedroom, and when she heard it, she dropped her phone. That same voice that lied to her for years was now lying to another woman. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about survival. Meanwhile, Kirk finally reappeared, not with a statement or apology, but through paparazzi lenses. Caught leaving a lawyer's office, hoodie on, face low, eyes hidden. TMZ wasted. No time. Kirk Frost hiding after second baby scandal. The timeline exploded again. But this time, Jasmine ended the live with one last dagger. I'm not proud of how I came into Rasheeda's life, but I won't let another woman suffer the way I did. And Maya, calmly but coldly, added, he said he was done with drama. What he meant was he's done getting caught. While the reality TV world was melting down, something else, something bigger was rumbling quietly behind the chaos. A storm in another lane. Another industry. Another throne. This one didn't involve babies or side chicks, but it carried the same weight: betrayal, truth, and revolution. It started with a leak. A performance clip from Kendrick Lamar and SZA, grainy but powerful. No names, no direct shots, just verses sharp enough to wound giants. At first, people thought it was a vibe. Then a snippet dropped. She wore a crown of plastic and bars borrowed from blogs. The internet gasped. Was that a jab at Nicki Minaj? Was Drake the ghost behind the curtain? Was this real? The timelines began splitting like tectonic plates. On one side was Rasheeda, shattered and silent. On the other, the music industry trembling under the weight of truth, disguised as lyricism. The leak of Kendrick and SZA's performance wasn't just a moment, it was a warning shot. A sonic earthquake. Legacy dust wasn't a track, it was a declaration. No shade, no names, but everyone knew who the fire was meant for. Spotify took it down from New Music Friday. Apple Music flagged it as experimental performance art and quietly suppressed its placement. YouTube started hitting fan uploads with limited monetization warnings. But it was already too late. The fire had caught. Fans were dissecting lyrics line by line. Creators were turning bars into mantras, and one post lit the fuse. When the machine fears you, it means you're telling the truth. Across Reddit, across TikTok, the reaction was electric. People didn't just hear the bars, they felt the pulse of something deeper. A challenge, a calling out, a reckoning. And then came the second explosion. A leaked track titled Fall from Grace. This time, Kendrick didn't hold back. I watched the kingdom fold behind applause, built a throne from silence and flawed laws. His words were cold, scalpel and unmistakably aimed. But it was SS's verse that shook the foundation. Told me I'd never last without Papa, but forgot I never needed a ghost to write how I feel. The timeline convulsed. Fans screamed. Critics praised. Theories swirled. Was that a shot at Drake? At Nicki? At both? The timeline fractured and the armies mobilized. Nicki Minaj clapped back on Queen Radio, voice fierce, ego louder. So we just out here pretending whispers can topple dynasties now. She snapped. I am the blueprint. I am the dynasty. And, just to prove it, she dropped a surprise track called Crown Theft. It wasn't subtle. Cut from the cloth. Your verses imitate. There's only one queen. Check the dinner plate. The barbs lit up the net, igniting hashtags like #Crown Theft and flooding timelines with edits, lyrics, and loyalty oaths. But Kendrick, he didn't respond with a diss. He responded with a picture. A black and white photo. A long empty dinner table, one crown, upside down. The caption read, "Royalty ain't inherited. It's earned in silence." Earned in silence. SZA reposted it with a single dove emoji. No words, just presence. Strategic, subtle, lethal. This wasn't a battle. This was war. But it wasn't the war fans were used to. It wasn't diss for diss or bar for bar. It was something colder. It was surgical. And then came the leak that changed everything. A Discord folder tied to a mysterious sound engineer. The files, internal documents, scripts, outlines, one folder titled GNX_closure_visual_final. Inside, a 3-part visual rollout, mapped with precision. Part 1, Idols and Illusions. Part 2, Ghost Crowns. Part 3. What's left when it ends? Each installment aimed directly at the industry's foundation. A black screen countdown appeared on SSS website with one word, closure. Back at VH1, Panic had a different face. Rasheeda had gone dark. Her team wasn't responding. Kirk was missing in action. The reunion schedule was crumbling, but unlike past seasons, this wasn't just about editing a fight. This was a war of perception. A war over story control. And for the first time, Rasheeda wasn't willing to give the network another ounce of vulnerability to sell. She wasn't going to cry on cue. Not again. Not for ratings. If they wanted the moment, they had to earn it, and that meant filming the confrontation raw. No editing room magic, no narrative reshaping, just truth. But Kirk wanted conditions. No producers, no crew, just me and her. It was a trap wrapped in a plea, but Rasheeda, she wasn't new to the game. She agreed, but on her terms. While that was being negotiated and back, the rest of the world was locked into something much bigger. The countdown was ticking. The whispers turned into roars. And suddenly, the industry stopped pretending it wasn't afraid. Universal Music called an emergency meeting. Internal documents leaked under the title YMC Disruption Mitigation Protocol. It outlined plans to counter Kendrick and SSS impact, nostalgia campaigns, influencer rollouts, homepage takeovers across platforms. And most tellingly, a Young Money tribute night scheduled 24 hours before the closure livestream. The plan was clear. Reclaim the throne. Reframe the narrative. Distract the audience. But the audience wasn't buying it, because something had changed. Something fundamental. This wasn't about entertainment anymore. This was about liberation. This was about women, artists, truth-tellers, saying enough. And in that same wave, Rasheeda made her move. She showed up to set. No glam, no entourage. Just a manila folder in her hand. Inside, ownership transfers, tax filings, legal receipts. Frost Bistro was now hers. Fully, quietly. No announcement, just freedom documented in ink. When Kirk finally arrived, escorted by 2 producers and a legal consultant, he looked hollow, like a man watching the walls close in on a fortress built with lies. He sat down, face low, hoodie up, and tried to speak. But Rasheeda beat him to it. You don't get to spin this anymore. You don't get to control the edit, the narrative, the damage control. Not this time. This time, I talk, and you listen. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't tremble. It cut. It ruled. It redefined. And as the cameras rolled, outside the studio, the final minutes of the countdown ticked away. The internet wasn't refreshing gossip blogs anymore. It was refreshing a black screen with red numbers. And on November 11th, at midnight, closure began. No intro. No music. Just silence. Then faces. Anonymous artists, dancers, ghost, session singers, fans. One by one, they whispered their truths. Exploitation. Suppression. Silence, bought and sold. Then came SZA, barefoot, standing in a studio, holding a mirror. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just stared. And then Kendrick stepped into frame. We built this from pain, he said. Not with filters, not with platinum plaques, but with scars. He held up a torn notebook, lyrics scribbled, blood dried in the corners. This industry doesn't need kings or queens, it needs accountability. The first track dropped idols and illusions. Raw, acoustic, unpolished. The internet didn't just watch, it wept. Then ghost crowns, archival footage of award shows, exploitation contracts, Piola transactions. Artist meltdowns played over worshipping fan chants. And then came the final act, what's left when it ends. Headlines dissolved into smoke. Charts vanished. Crowns melted. In the final frame, a golden throne burned down to ash. One line glowed. No kings, no queens, just truth. Beneath it, 11/11ths. The fall of idols. By dawn, the world had changed. Streaming platforms were forced to re-add the music. YouTube couldn't suppress the uploads fast enough. The project closure wasn't a drop. It was a cultural detonation. Critics called it the most important artistic event since Lemonade. Commentators called it a revolution wrapped in rhythm. And in the eye of this storm, Drake still hadn't responded. Nicki dropped a new track, Throne Reborn, but it drowned in the wave. Even her fans were torn. We love you, but this ain't it. One viral comment said. The shift already happened. In Atlanta, while social media was still trying to catch its breath, Rasheeda broke her silence. Not with a confessional, not through VH1, not on a reunion stage. But with something far more dangerous. Independence. She released a single video. No filters, no background music, no fake backdrops. Just her, sitting in her living room, camera, eye to eye, voice steady. This chapter ends with me walking away. Not as a victim, but as a woman who finally chose herself. She didn't cry. She didn't shade. She didn't even mention Kirk's name, but the message was clear. She was done performing pain. She confirmed full ownership of Frost Bistro, announced a quiet relaunch under a new name, Unbreakable, and then, without ceremony, unfollowed Kirk on every platform. It wasn't petty, it was power. And just like that, her silence became louder than any fight. The internet caught on quick. Within an hour, a tweet went viral. Rasheeda walking away from Kirk while SCA and Kendrick burned down the throne. That's not coincidence. That's cultural cleansing. It hit over 250,000 likes before breakfast. Comment sections exploded with solidarity. We done watching queens carry broken empires. No more crying in makeup chairs for the same man who don't even buy diapers. Let the throne burn. We rebuilding something real. It wasn't just a love and hip-hop moment anymore. It was a movement. And the timing. Too perfect to be accidental. Because just as Rasheeda closed one door, the world watched as an entire industry fell through another. Closure wasn't just trending. It was infecting. Inspiring. Independent artists began stepping forward with their own stories of being silenced, shelved, stolen from. Producers, background singers, even former A&Rs came forward, anonymously and publicly, sharing contracts, hidden clauses, stolen credits. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Hashtag no more ghost crowns. Hashtag art over algorithm. Hashtag we are the movement. But even in the chaos, it was clear. This wasn't cancel culture. This was clarity culture. A cultural cleansing, not to destroy, but to disinfect. And, in that moment, Rasheeda, the woman once painted as the quiet wife who kept forgiving, became something more. A symbol. Not just of pain, but of freedom. Her video was reposted over 3 million times in the first 2 days. From fan accounts to feminist blogs to music theorists who never even watched a single episode of VH1, everyone was sharing it. She wasn't just a cast member anymore. She was a movement, a visual metaphor for a bigger shift. And with every view, every share, the industry began to panic. The usual tricks didn't work anymore. The nostalgia rollouts fell flat. The influencer campaigns felt fake. The tribute specials aired with forced applause. But the public, they weren't watching. They were listening. They were asking questions, real questions. Who gets to build a legacy off silence? Why do we keep forgiving men who leave women, bleeding in private just to smile for the camera, in public? Why is every woman who speaks up called bitter? And everyone who stays quiet called strong? The music industry wasn't ready. VH1 wasn't ready. And even Kirk, who'd spent years dodging consequences with charm and excuses, had no defense now. Not against the proof. Not against the voice notes. Not against the reality that the woman who once protected him on national TV now stood tall and unbothered alone. But finally free. And it didn't stop there. The ripple grew. Behind the scenes, a memo leaked from one of the major streaming platforms, an internal call to audit past royalty distributions after closure exposed ghostwriting networks and unpaid contributors. Labels were shook. Quiet lawsuits started getting filed. Legacy artists suddenly found themselves needing to explain old lyrics, old contracts, old betrayals. And at the center of it all, Kendrick and SZA said nothing. No follow-ups. No new tracks. Just silence. Because they knew silence wasn't absence, it was pressure. It was strategy. It was the sound of power returning to those who were always kept quiet. Drake finally resurfaced, but not with a diss. Instead, he posted an Instagram story, a photo of a candle burning next to a Grammy, and a caption, "Some things never change." The comments were brutal. "Yeah, like you ducking smoke." Did the ghost write that caption too? Nicki tried one last time. Another surprise track, this one titled Throne Reborn PT2, but it was too late. The culture had already shifted. Even her most loyal fans were divided. Some clapped. Some begged her to stop. "We love you." One viral comment read, "But truth already won. You can't remix closure." Meanwhile, Rasheeda's rebrand was booming. Unbreakable launched with a merch drop that sold out in 11 minutes. No VH1 promo. No network support. Just a woman who had finally taken the scissors to her puppet strings. She began collaborating with local businesses, quietly funding a documentary about women in the industry who'd been silenced, using her platform not to cry, but to amplify. The same woman once mocked for staying silent was now the one turning up the volume on everyone else's truth and in the deepest corner of the internet. Fans began weaving all the pieces together. They started calling it the era of reckoning, where the reality stars, the artists, the overlooked, the ghosted, all started speaking. And not through scream matches or clapbacks, through actions, through exposure, through truth that didn't ask permission to be heard. One fan tweeted, "Rasheeda didn't walk away from a man. She walked away from a system that profits off women breaking in silence." And, just like that, another layer peeled back as the month ended. VH1 released a statement teasing the most honest reunion in franchise history, but Rasheeda didn't show. She left them with footage, with pain, with facts, but not her presence. Her final post was 6 words. "I gave y'all enough. I'm done." No hashtags, no emojis, just truth. Meanwhile, in a quiet studio across the country, SCA posted a photo. No caption. Just her sitting on the floor with a pen and her notebook. Kendrick reposted it with one line. "We still writing. But not for them." That was it. The revolution didn't end with explosions. It ended with pens moving in silence. With women reclaiming their voices, with kings falling off plastic thrones and queens refusing to beg for seats. In a year where crowns melted, empires cracked, and silence became both a weapon and a war cry. Truth didn't need autotune. It didn't need edits. It didn't need a filter. It just needed to be believed, because in the end, Rasheeda walked away. SSZA burned the throne. And Kendrick proved the loudest legacy is built not with volume but with vision. And sometimes, silence.